A 20 and 21-year-old booked a cruise, but then were told, not so fast. You need to cruise with a guardian over 25 or you can't cruise at all. A bachelorette shared her booze hack online that got her banned from one cruise line, and another cruise line, and yeah, it's one you might not expect, is jumping on the nickel and diming trend in cruising. And a disturbing hidden camera case at sea is now heading toward a major courtroom showdown. Hi, I'm Melissa, a university professor who loves to cruise and who loves to talk ship. So let's get right into it. Let's start with the story that set the cruise online community on fire this week. A 20-year-old and a just turned 21-year-old booked a cruise together thinking that they were good to go. They're grown adults, right? They can vote, they can serve in the military, they're adults. But after paying and locking in non-refundable flights, they got a not so nice notice saying, well, actually, you can't sail at all unless you have a guardian who is at least 25 years old. Now, it turns out one of them was still under 21 on embarkation day. And cruise lines, obviously, they know your birth date because we have to do that to cruise. Now, Carnival, this is the cruise line we're talking about, their policy, but there are other cruise lines that do this, require that guests under age 21 travel with someone who's 25 or older, unless they're married or active military. Now, this couple eventually, thankfully, found an older couple who were, so to say, willing to sponsor them and say that they were their adult guardian over 25, which is ridiculous because these are adults. Again, they're 20 and they're 21. But by then, the internet was arguing, of course, because that's what the cruise community does. I love the cruise community, but, you know, we can be some spicy people. And it sparked a big debate over whether or not this rule is outdated or necessary for ship safety. But here's the key. Many travelers forget that cruise lines do often treat legal adults differently than hotels do. So if you're in that 18 to 20-year-old range, double check the cruise line's policy before you book, and never lock in your airfare until after that final payment if you're unsure. It's just one of those small print details that can save you a lot of hassle and a lot of money later. So I want to know, what do you think about this policy? Is it ridiculous that people that are this age who are adults are not able to cruise without a guardian? Let me know down in the comments. Another story that set the world on fire. This one made the rounds on TikTok. Yet again, a cruiser wanted to brag and they told on themselves. And this person is sharing a hack. This is not the first time I've seen this happen. Actually, this is the second notable case this year. But in this case, it was a woman who was on a bachelorette cruise and she wanted to share her little hack on TikTok, bragging about how she's disguising alcohol inside other bottles and using other clever packing hacks to get alcohol on board, and the video went viral. She came home, posted about it, bragging that she'd beaten the system. She didn't have to pay for all this money for the drink package. She saved a lot of money on her bachelorette. But of course, the cruise lines are on social media too. They have social media teams that scour the internet to see the ship talking that we do about them. Trust me, I know. And immediately people on TikTok started snitching on this lady, tagging Carnival to bring this to their attention. Now, this lady said that then when she booked another sailing, she said that Carnival flagged her account, searched her luggage, confiscated some of the disguised bottles, and then, this is the big whammy, they banned her from sailing. Now, Carnival's official response, it's simple here. The cruise line has a zero tolerance policy on smuggling alcohol. Say what you will about cruise line packages being overpriced. Luckily, I'm not a drinker, so I don't have much of a say on this. But regardless, you gotta follow the rules. This is a company, they set the rules. And passengers who think they're really clever in doing this, if they get caught, they can be denied boarding or permanently banned. So this is a perfect example of how content online can come back to bite you. I'm all about sharing cruise line hacks, but the legitimate ones that are not violating policy. So if you do this, for the love of Pete, don't brag about it on social media. Remember, the cruise lines, they can and they do see it. And to be honest, sneaking booze, it's just not worth it anymore. Yeah, those drink packages are expensive, but do you really want to add all that stress to your vacation just to save a few bucks? And also, girls that are traveling with this lady, why are you letting a soon-to-be bride on her bachelorette have to foot the bill for her alcohol anyway? But that's just my take, but let me know what you think. Now, speaking of expensive alcohol on cruise ships and expensive everything on cruises, because we're starting to really get into this escalation of fees. I kind of rail about it all the time because I notice it. I'm a business professor. I pay a lot of attention to the economics of cruising, and the tide has really been shifting over the past few years. And now we have another cruise line that is jumping on the nickel and diming trend. And this is one that kind of surprises me. Anyway, this cruise line has now announced that its drink package will no longer be honored on its private island starting on March 1st, 2026. And I'm talking about Norwegian Cruise Line. Norwegian, you're better than this. We expect it from other cruise lines, the value cruise lines, right? We expect them to nickel and dime because the cruise fares are really low. And I will give a quick shout out to MSC, who has some of the cheapest cruise fares, and they still allow guests to use the drink package on their private island, which is actually one of my favorite private islands, which is Ocean Key. Now with Norwegian, what they're doing here, they're still gonna give guests soft drinks and basic water, how generous. But if you want cocktails or alcohol, there will be, and this is adding insult to injury, a new island only drink package that you have to buy separately. So that means that you're going to a private island, which Norwegian is Great Stirrup Key. I'm actually going to be taking my first Norwegian cruise in November, calling to Great Stirrup Key. Again, I don't drink. It doesn't take effect until March 1st. It won't affect me anyway. But this is the kind of thing that puts a bad taste in my mouth. It's nickel and diming. So that means that if you buy a drink package, which is not cheap, to use it on the cruise ship, you're taken to the cruise ship private island. You're held captive there because a lot of these cruise private islands, you can't go anywhere. You're kind of stuck there. So now your all-inclusive drink package stops being all-inclusive the minute you step on the island. And if you want alcohol to be inclusive, you gotta buy a separate package. It's super frustrating, especially because cruisers, we assume private islands are meant to be an extension of the ship. That's how cruise lines often advertise this. Now, Norwegian's not alone. There are some other cruise lines that do not allow their drink package to work on their private islands, like Carnival. So if you go to Carnival's Ocean Key, Half Moon Key, or now Celebration Key, you can't use your drink package there. That also goes for another Carnival Corporation company, which is Holland America Line. Although interestingly, Princess is also part of the Carnival family, and you can use the drink package on the private island. So make it make sense. I don't know. But here's where it gets worse for Norwegian. Just days after this announcement, which obviously made Norwegian cruisers super mad about it, Norwegian quietly added limits to their room service. Another form of nickel and diming. And this one's kind of weird, actually. I get just charging for room service or charging a delivery fee, but what they did here is that now guests can only order one hot and one cold item per person per delivery. It's crazy. It's crazy. Now, they already had implemented a service fee, so there's no change in that. And they also have a required 20% gratuity, also no change in that. But now you get one hot, one cold. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I've heard a lot of dumb things in cruise world. So in this case, you could order eggs and toast, but not eggs and something else hot, not like a full breakfast spread. And this new rule first showed up on one ship, but passengers are also reporting similar notices of this policy elsewhere, which suggests that it's probably rolling out fleet-wide. Now, it's not official cruise line-wide yet. Norwegian has not said whether they're doing this to reduce food waste. That's our usual excuse. We want to reduce food waste. No, you're nickel and diming your passengers. That's what you're doing. Just call a spade a spade. Or if they're doing it to cut costs, which we know that's the real reason, but passengers are obviously not happy. Now with Norwegian, you're getting hit with these drink restrictions, now these room service limits, and also there is a recent addition with a main dining room extra entree fee. It's really starting to feel like these cruise lines are testing how much they can push us as cruisers before we start to push back. Now, 2025 has been a banger of a year for cruise lines. They're recording record profits. They're building massive multi-million-dollar mega ships. They're building massive private islands where they're going to nickel and dime us to death. So they're not hurting financially, although a lot of them carry massive loads of debt as well. So there's that little factor. But I want to know, when it comes to this nickel and diming stuff, when do we say enough is enough? And we're going to vote with our pocketbooks, because honestly, when it comes to corporate America, that's really the only thing they listen to. Now, speaking of shakeups, here's a positive one. A good one. Not all is bad in cruise news this week. Texas cruisers, you're about to see a new player on your home turf. Galveston, you got it going on. You got a lot of great stuff happening there. And there's some rumored stuff. I do think that Royal Caribbean, when they roll out their new mega ship, because it's going to call on the Western Caribbean, I suspect they're going to sail out of Galveston. I have no inside intel. It's just Melissa's theory, Melissa's hypothesis. I could be wrong, but we will see. But anyway, this story is not about Royal Caribbean, it's about MSC. MSC Seascape, gorgeous ship, love it, one of my faves, is going to start sailing from Galveston in November, marking MSC's first major push into the Texas market. Now, this ship will run that Western Caribbean route that a lot of ships out of Galveston sail, which is Cozumel, Costa Maya, and Roatan. And the company is already teasing Texas-inspired menus and entertainment to appeal to the local crowd. And little side note here, I recently sailed Carnival Jubilee. I got to do a behind-the-scenes kitchen tour, and I actually talked to the chef about this, about whether or not they modified the menu for Texas cruises. And he said that they do. He said that Texas cruises, they actually order more meat. So it's not like they're actually modifying the menu. They actually just know Texans, or people sailing out of Texans, are going to tend to eat more meat than cruisers who sail out of Florida, for example. Just a really interesting little tidbit that I found to be Fascinating. Now, this matters because Galveston is one of the fastest growing US cruise ports. Adding another big name operator means more competition, and I love that because while we're getting nickel and dime to death, competition is good for consumers because it means better pricing, usually. So I look forward to maybe some flash sales as MSC tries to capture loyal Carnival, although a lot of us aren't loyal to Carnival that much anymore, and loyal to Royal cruisers who live in the Dallas and Houston areas. And there's a lot of us too that are willing to fly in to sail out of Galveston. I've done it a couple of times. Now, if you are driving in though, be prepared. I don't love sailing out of Galveston. I like it. I like the cruise port. I like the options out of there. I like that Western Caribbean itinerary, but I do not like that drive down I-45. It can be a real bottleneck getting from Houston down to Galveston. So if you do get intrigued by one of these new offerings, you want to sail out of Galveston, you've never done it before, just build in a little bit of a time buffer. I do have a free guide on Port of Galveston. Drop it in the comments as you plan your travel out of Galveston. So I want to know what you think about this. Texans, I know you're happy about it, but what do you think about more options out of different home ports than just Florida? Now let's jump into what I would call this week's social media ethics fight. There's always social media fights, that's cruise world, right? But in this case, it sparked a debate, right? So a video went viral of a couple sleeping soundly on their cruise balcony, filmed from another cruise ship. Now, this clip racked up hundreds of thousands of views and the comments were brutal. Trust me, I'm used to nasty people on social media, but these were pretty nasty. Half of the people said, if you're on an open balcony, it's public. You can be filmed. It's public space, right? Now, the other half said, okay, that's just really weird and creepy. So half the commenters were kind of dragging the sleeping couple. The other half were dragging the person who filmed it and put it on social media. Now, this is a gray area with modern travel. Ships are packed with people. People have phones. There are influencers who are out there chasing views. I don't know what that's all about. And I will say, side note, I am always very mindful to not prominently film people unless I have their express consent. Not everyone does that. But the privacy expectations at sea, they are still murky. Technically, balconies, even though that's part of your room, they are visible to other people, but most people treat them as private space. I know a lot of people like to brag about their on balconies, which I can't imagine ever doing, because yeah, people can see you, people can film you. Now, the bigger issue here is respect. If you would not want a clip of you online doing something on a balcony, like sleeping, don't post someone else and don't do things on the balcony. Cruise lines are also starting to crack down harder on guest behavior that violates policy and harasses other people on social media. I'm a big fan of mind your business, but I want to know where you draw the line. Is this couple fair game for filming if you're sleeping on the balcony? I've also seen people have clotheslines on a balcony, have a kiddie pool on the balcony, people film it. Do you think that's fair game, or do you think people should mind their business? And finally, a story that is really gross, really sad, it's really serious, and it is a reminder that these cruise ships are not safe havens. I tend to have this false sense of safety cruising as well, because you feel like you're in a little self-contained city. You see the same people over again. You see security, there's cameras everywhere. You think you're safe. But this is actually a really scary story. Now, the situation is developing. A Miami federal court is preparing to hear arguments in a class action lawsuit involving hidden cameras that were allegedly planted by a stateroom attendant aboard a major cruise ship. And it's a Royal Caribbean cruise ship. Prosecutors say the crew member filmed passengers, including some children, in their cabins without their knowledge. He was criminally convicted and sentenced to 30 years in prison last year. Now, hundreds of potential victims are suing Royal Caribbean, claiming emotional trauma and invasion of privacy. And here's where it gets complicated. Royal Caribbean is trying to push the case into arbitration instead of open court, arguing that as passengers, when we take a cruise, we agree to a lot of unsavory things in our contract of carriage. And when you book a cruise, if you ever do actually read your contract of carriage, we don't have a lot of rights. So when we buy our tickets, we're waiving a lot of our rights. So a lot of cruisers don't realize that. So they're trying to stand on that. Now, arbitration happens, of course, behind closed doors with limited discovery, no jury. So of course, Royal Caribbean wants this. They don't want this stuff splashed out in the newspapers and on social media by people yapping about them like me. But victims' attorneys are arguing that this is the kind of case, especially involving privacy violations of children, they should not be forced into private arbitration under US law. Now, a hearing is set for the end of this month, and it could shape how future victims of voyeurism or harassment at sea, because again, it's different at sea when things happen, pursue justice. So it's an unsettling reminder to check your stateroom. I know cruise stewards are some of the most amazing people. We would never think they would do anything like this, but it has happened, and it could very well happen again. So always be cautious and understand that your cruise contract limits what rights you have, and stay vigilant, even at sea.